Hi, it has been a really long time. There is so much going on in my life that affects my ability to make these videos. But the first one I really want to share is the fact that I'm having an issue with sewing. My cat just noped out. She does not want to hear none of it. I'm allergic to nickel, and basic sewing needles are all nickel plated or made out of nickel. And I am having really, really bad reactions at this point in time. I can't sew. Not until I find an alternative. And I'm having trouble doing that because I really like tiny, tiny little needles. And I'm not able to find like a reliable source of alternative materials. Like search up steel needles and you'll get like AliExpress. I don't trust AliExpress when they say they have like 100% steel needles. I just don't. The other things I've found is maybe there's one site with hypoallergenic needles, but they're really expensive, like $20 for one. And I don't think they have the really small ones that I'm looking for. Another alternative that I found is way to go, historical community. I love y'all. There's people on Etsy making brass needles or copper needles, but they're really big. Like I would probably only be willing to sew with them on wool or doing historical garments because they are just like honking. So I don't know what the solution is going to be for me being able to continue sewing. If you have any recommendations or you've tried this or you have this problem, please let me know down below. I've been trying to solve this for a while now. I've looked into gold needles and they're almost always tapestry, so I don't know what I'm gonna do. Hopefully someone will reply with something I could use, and I don't want to stop sewing. I like y'all. I like sewing in general. Miss it. Let's get into the video. When I work with patterns, I typically use tracing paper to preserve the original. But in this case, the size 14 here is the smallest because it goes up to 22. And this 14 is a little big on me. So what I'm going to do is change the size. And let's zoom in here a little bit. If you lay the green over, which is my original size, so the green is 14. If you move this up to the next size and line it up, and then retrace the 14, this shrinks it down to size 12 because each of these is roughly the same size. So this is a nice, easy way to scale your patterns down, is use the difference between each of these sizes. I went ahead and did this with each pattern piece. You can see my new size 12 purple and my original size 14. And this side is the same for all the patterns, so I have no markings on this side. And you can see how it's just a nice, simple decrease. The first row is about 1/4 from where I marked my seam allowance. My second row of stitches, I also did about 1/4 of an inch from the first set, and I went back and made sure that I didn't go over these two notches. For the gathers, I did the same kind of stitches, and here is where my pin is marked. I'm going to pull up the stitches a little bit and then figure 8 them around the pin, hold it in place. And this is supposed to be gathered into 3 1/4 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a ruler. Now that it's gathered, I'm just going to work it kind of evenly. And for the next step, you take the right sides and place them together and sew along this seam. Now that I've put the right sides together, I'm going to point out that there's a long side and a short side. The pattern says to stitch along this seam allowance, but stop at the dot on the short side. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. The pattern calls for a fusible interface, but I'm going to go ahead and use this canvas that I have instead. And I'm going to baste these 2 pieces together. Now that that is basted, I have pinned the top and bottom together. Now remember when I assumed these were kind of stay stitches? Well, they're actually gathering threads for this section too. So I am going to go ahead and find the center of this and pin it like so. And then find the halfway point. So I'm matching up the notch here, and just pinning that on the side. And this notch, pinning that here, is going to be a little bit longer. And then I'm going to gently pull these. Was I stupid to try sewing with such long nails? Yes. I'm going to do it anyway. And just gently pull these into place. Move these just over a little bit. Now that that is neatly gathered, I'm going to go ahead and stitch this in place. Okay, I've been dumb and I forgot to mark these, so I'm going to do that real quick. And then I finished sewing these. Let's see. I'm going to use this one. You just line it up on the right side. I'm going to pin this and you sew along the seam line. Now I need to pin the lining together, so let's see. Always, always, always press your seams. It is so worth it. Especially when this is going to be like a delicate garment and it's going to have so many layers to it and ruffles. Problem with pressing gatherings is it makes them all flat and not nice, but I still think it's worth it because you're going to flip the seams inside the lining. If I can get this open without burning myself. The answer is probably no, but I'm going to try anyway. The next step is to put the right sides together. So I'm going to put these right there, little notches. Pin these together. I'm going to do this all the way around. I seem that I probably should have stitched further up. Make sure this little guy isn't twisted just to make it easier. I'm going ahead and marking my stitch line with thread. That way I'm slightly basting it together, but also saving my time trying to mark it out with chalk. especially all those little ridges from the gathering. So I trimmed off some of the seam allowance and clipped my curves somewhat haphazardly. Would this be easier to do with an ironing board? Yes. Am I going to get one? No. But I'm going to take this and I'm going to turn the lining up so it's pressed against the seam allowance. I'm going to try and carefully press this from the top in and avoid most of this bulk here. That way I'm not pressing down these. I can't say they're good gathers, but they're there. So the idea is on the inside, sew these two pieces together so that they're nicely tacked down. I'm going to try and keep these pretty close together. And I'm just going to make a few stitches. I don't think it needs to be too nicely done. Can you hear my cat destroy her scratching post? She's mad that I won't feed her. I will, just, proper time and not 5 hours early. Just because she's mad at me. It would so help if I didn't put my needle on a dry leaf. Don't ask me why I have a dried leaf. And get little crummies everywhere. Okay, try and make this as flat as I can, because we don't need extra bulk where sternum goes. Okay, I'm going to tie this off, and then the next step is to baste this bottom edge all the way across. I did not mark this necessarily the way I should, but I'm going to take one of the straps and you cross them over to the next side, and then you're supposed to lay them down along the seam like so. I'm gonna pin these down, and I think I twisted this, so I'm gonna hold it up and see real quick. I think that's how it's supposed to go. And then take the other one, lay it across. Let's see if I can get this up a little bit more. That kind of naturally wants to take the shape that it's supposed to sit in. I'm going to go ahead and fell down both sides. I think felling looks nicer. And there we go. I'm sewing together my band. Need to do it between these two little marks, and I just marked in my seam allowance with a pin. I finished sewing this seam and I went ahead and pinned the seam allowance for the bottom of this band. I'm going to go ahead and press this flat and then cut it. I pinned the seam allowance in, and I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that this small little seam is folded under and follow my pins. This is the one I had the most hope for, like actually being good, but there's nothing good about the way this is laying, and the little wings on the side, I don't need them. Don't need them. So my inexperienced brain goes, well, I did lose weight. maybe the pattern's not that bad, but I'm also like, you only lost maybe 2 inches at most. I don't think even if I gained them back, this would sit well. So I'm thinking, and correct me if you have more sewing experience than I do, that if I took off like maybe this much of the pattern all the way over, and if I don't know, this one I'm not sure about, but I think if I took off like just a little, maybe inch off the pattern at the top of this, it would actually be better. And then this part fits really, really well. So maybe just like a small dart here to pull this, or maybe remove a little bit here. I don't know. Someone with more pattern experience than me, let me know. I think the band fits really, really well. Let me know what you think of this monstrosity. I was so hopeful. I hate it. I should also mention that I sized this down before I lost the weight. So already the pattern was not correctly sized. So this just kind of shows that maybe it's the pattern and not just me losing a lot of weight because of stress. I had the worst 2 months of my life, like, during this video, so probably not that great. But I did it, and we're moving on.